Hello, welcome to the Market Bull. Today I'm speaking with Ben Turney, CEO from Kavango Resources. Ben, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Great. Can we start by summarising your recent announcements from the Kalahari Suture zone and at Ditau?
Yeah, absolutely. So with both projects, we've done a lot of work over the last 6 months, working with the data that we gathered from the drill campaigns that we completed last year. Takes quite a bit of time. It requires a bit of patience because when drilling into these types of targets and working with the type of geophysical data we work with, it's quite a time-consuming task. And obviously we've had a lot of our focus recently has been in the Kalahari copper belt as well. But we're really delighted with the results of these two work streams because essentially what we've managed to achieve is we've upgraded both target areas. So in terms of the Kalahari Suture zone, the B1 conductor, we've now remodeled our downhole electromagnetic data from our fourth hole that we drilled last year, and the geophysical anomaly we're looking at is now exhibiting a Siemens conductance of 27,800 Siemens. I mean, that really is an A-ranked target in terms of nickel exploration. Meanwhile, down at Ditau, this morning's news is a big surprise to us. This BIF system that we've hit, which has got potential to be a lode gold system, is potentially an enormous lead for the company. I'll happily talk you through a bit more about that in a moment, but we're very, very excited about these initial results. And we've got more work that's coming up on both of these as we bring ourselves closer to being drill ready a little bit later this year.
Fantastic, thank you. So moving back to the RNS on the Kalahari Suture zone, that highlights the potential presence of pyrrhotite at B1. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, so we have to be clear at this stage, the pyrrhotite idea is just an interpretation. So we haven't actually encountered pyrrhotite yet, because obviously if we had done that, we probably would have made a discovery. Now, the reason that pyrrhotite is very important in nickel exploration is that it can occur alongside nickel copper mineralisation. And the thing about pyrrhotite is it is extremely conductive. One of the areas that Jeremy has been really painstaking on over the last 6 months, he's really now our head chief geophysicist, is to rule out sort of other potential causative bodies that we might be looking at to give us obviously higher confidence in the drill. Now, there aren't many things in nature that are as conductive as 27,800 Siemens, so we know that we're dealing with an exceptionally conductive body, and it's Jeremy's belief that what we could be looking at, we're within the range of a potential pyrrhotite bearing system. Now, if, and I have to emphasize the if here, if it turns out that we have encountered pyrrhotite at that level, that would obviously be extremely good news for us because the chances are that would also sit alongside potentially a nickel copper sulfide body. But of course, the only way we're ever going to be able to test this is to drill it. So we're now moving ourselves towards being drill ready, I think a little bit later this year.
Thank you. We'll look forward to hearing more on that. Next, can you walk us through the next round of exploration you've got planned?
So we're currently doing more work at the moment from surface on the B3 and B4 conductors. So those are the other two targets that are very close to B1. Now, the reason that those two targets or all three targets together in a cluster is important is because from an idealized perspective, that conforms to the Norilsk model that we've always been pursuing in the KSZ. So to have a cluster of these conductive bodies so close to one another, it's circumstantial evidence, but again, it's more circumstantial evidence pointing in the same direction. Now, one of the big lessons that we learned from last year's drilling was the original plate model that we had on the B1 conductor that from memory we modelled at around about 8,500 Siemens from surface. The actual plate model itself was quite large. When we actually came to drill the target, it turned out there were two conductive bodies down there, which we passed between the middle of. One of which is the B1 conductor, and the other is, we believe, a formational conductor that gave us a skewed reading from the surface. Now, the current plate models that we have for B3 and B4, they're very large plates. So, of course, we could simply go out and just drill these, put a hole right into the middle of them. That would be the appropriate sort of exploration methodology. But what we're actually aiming to do is to take some new technology out to the KSZ. It's a different form of TDEM that we'll be putting an announcement out very soon to try and give us a more sharply defined view of these two targets so that hopefully we can isolate them a bit better, make the plate models a bit smaller, and therefore give us higher confidence that when we actually come to drill those targets, we'll hit them and establish exactly what the source of the conductive bodies is. Once we've completed that, at that point we're drill ready. So at that point we mobilize the rig, we get straight into the field. B1, to all intents and purposes, is now drill ready. It will then be our goal goal when we actually come out to drill these targets. We want to drill all three of them. So obviously from our point of view, we want to have the highest confidence going into this drill campaign that we will actually hit these bodies and definitively prove what they are once and for all.
Excellent, thanks Ben. Moving back to Ditau, can you tell us about the potential for gold outlined in the recent announcement?
Yeah, so this is a complete outlier for us. It's a big surprise. We started off our exploration program with Kavango looking recently for carbonatites. So Hilary had the idea that we'd identified these 12 ring structures, which were geophysical anomalies. They're all buried by cover. So it was a conceptual exploration model that he put together. We drill tested that last year, and while we didn't hit carbonatites, what we have hit is this incredibly interesting looking zone of interest. It runs for about 100 meters, from 293 meters down to 393 meters, and is open at the end of the hole. We were targeting the I-10 anomaly, so it's a very discrete circular body that's about 1 kilometer by 1.5 kilometers in diameter, in width. So it's quite an interesting target for us, so it always was. But now that we've actually got this work that's been done by Dr. Hamid Moomin over in Canada, he's a professor of economic geology, he's a world expert in IOCG systems and also in gold systems. Well, we wondered whether what we were looking at was potentially IOCG, so iron oxide, copper, gold, because we had obviously presence of iron oxide, we had confirmation of gold and also copper in the system. So we found Hamid to perform a review of this data for us. Now, while at the moment he hasn't ruled out the IOCG potential within this system, what he's actually come back and given us is quite an interesting report telling us that we could be looking at a lode gold system. Now, the thing about these lode gold systems, Sarah, is they host world-class deposits. I mean, they can hold 10 million ounce plus deposits. They can be enormous in scale. And what's encouraging for us at this stage is that we've hit 100 meters of this BIF. Very, very thick formation. It's heavily altered. There's clearly been a lot of hydrothermal activity through this, so a lot of fluids have passed through this area. And what's important about the iron in these formations is that the iron acts almost like a chemical trap that causes gold to drop out of the solution and hopefully form in economic deposits. Now, we're not saying we've hit an economic deposit yet, but what we do believe we have are the ingredients, the right sort of host environment for what could be a major gold discovery. Now, obviously, this means we've had to go back to the drawing board in terms of our exploration and our interpretation of the data that we have. But one of the leads that we're pursuing is these banded iron formations, because obviously they're heavily imbued with iron. They're obviously therefore heavily magnetic. So that gives us a really good lead to pursue in terms of modelling these from surface. There have also been other drill holes that have been drilled in the area. So we know that this target has been targeted by another company, and we're hoping to be able to go and review their drill cores as well. And that might teach us a bit more before we come back to this project with the drill rig.
Thanks, Ben. I was going to ask you next actually about the banded iron formation and why that's so important. I think you've perhaps touched on that, unless there's anything else to add. Why is it so important?
So as I say, it acts as a trap to be able to help the gold that's sort of trapped in the fluids drop out as the fluids pass through the system. But what it also gives us is the thickness of this banded iron formation. If we look at other similar banded iron formations around the world that can occur a bit closer to surface, they run anywhere from sort of a few meters up to several hundred meters in depth. Obviously, the larger the formation, the greater the chance there was for a lot of fluids to have passed through and for therefore a lot of gold to have dropped out. So the fact that we've got 100 meters thickness of this in just the first hole that we've targeted this magnetic anomaly, and it was open at depth. When I was out in Botswana last year, one of the things that really struck me when I reviewed the cores from our Ditau drill campaign, it was as clear as day that we could see that the alteration that started at about 293 meters carried on right down to the end of hole at 393. Now, obviously, we've got to look at why we stopped that hole. I think that in hindsight, we should certainly have carried on. And I expect in terms of our next steps, one of the first things we will do will be to come and revisit this hole once we've completed some of the assay work and petrological work that Dr. Moomin has advised us to do.
Thanks, Ben. Lots going on and lots to look forward to. For now, can you just tell us some more about Kavango's plans for Ditau from here?
Right, so we're doing a complete comprehensive data review at the moment. So we've sent samples off to Dr. Moomin in Canada. We've actually sent Brett out to Botswana. He's just landed this morning. So it's a last minute trip for Brett because we need obviously one of our most experienced team members to go and perform a new review of the cores. So we're going to relog the cores. We're going to send off more samples for assay testing. We're going to send off more samples for petrological testing as well. We expect that work will be complete by the end of April. In the meantime, we're also going to go and see what we can do about reviewing other local holes that we know have been drilled in the area. We've got a very interesting lead that we're pursuing on that front. And meanwhile, Jeremy and Hilary are going to be performing a complete review of our geophysical data set as well. So we've got quite comprehensive geophys over Ditau. Now that we're looking at this from a lode gold perspective, that obviously means that we're looking for different signatures and different clues within the data that we have to help us identify potential areas where we might find traps for economic mineralisation of gold. Once we've completed that work, we're then going to mobilise the teams out to Ditau to conduct more surveys. So we've obviously got this wonderful CSAMT technology that we've been using in the KSZ. We've used it at Ditau before, and we've also been using it in the KCB. That will help us, we hope, identify the right sort of structures. We're looking for very specific types of trap when hunting for gold mineralisation. I also expect we'll conduct some IP surveys as well. So it's called induced polarity, and that's a different type of survey. It's one we haven't used so much in our exploration for base metals, but in gold exploration, IP can be very valuable, and we have the equipment available to us. Once we've been through that part of the program, by the end of that, hopefully we will have drill targets, so we'll have identified potential trap zones. One of the challenges with gold exploration is that the metal itself is a bit geophysically blind. So we're not going to be looking for conductive bodies as we are, for example, with the nickel and copper exploration that we're conducting in the KSZ and KCB. Instead, what we have to look for are trap zones where the hydrothermal fluids would have passed through and hopefully led to accumulations of this of gold.
Wonderful, thanks Ben. And finally, to wrap things up, can you share your timeframes for exploration for both projects?
So when we last drilled the KSZ and Ditau, we did them consecutively. It's looking like that will now be our plan again. We've obviously got quite a lot more work that we need to do in Ditau in particular before we're drill ready. But my hope is that over the next couple of months, we'll complete the work that we're doing in the KSZ. We'll have tightened up those drill targets for B3 and B4. We'll look to mobilise the drill rig. We'll go for B1 first this time, and then we'll follow up with B3 and B4. Once we've finished drilling at the KSZ, that will probably take us about 6 months based on previous progress. By the end of that campaign, we'll then be ready to mobilise to Ditau, and at that point, hopefully we'll have identified some really good targets for us to go for in terms of our exploration and looking for gold at Ditau. So in parallel to the drilling in the KSZ, that's when we'll be conducting all of this work that I just described with the IP surveys, with more CSAMT, really as a complete sort of overhaul of our exploration strategy and what's now looking like a very, very exciting new project area for us.
Thanks Ben, it's been a really interesting and comprehensive update. Appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to speaking again on the Market Ball.
Thanks for having me.